Hello, and welcome to Opus 2 of Let's Play It by Ear podcast. I know we've been away for a while, but now we are back. I'm Carrie with my co host Joanna here for our very first episode.
Whee!
Yee!
So, we're here to talk about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm sure that most of you have probably been wondering why we've been gone for so long. We did mention that we were going to just take like a month or so of a break, and then we are just going to go straight into the second opus. But we didn't. And that's because I had a bit of a life emergency, I guess is how I'll put it. I think at the time that we were set to record the first episode of this particular season, we actually had to stop mid-recording because, on my end, we had a bit of an emergency. So the emergency was my husband he wasn't diagnosed at that time, but we found out what his diagnosis was maybe a week or two after we had to stop recording mid-session. But he was diagnosed with topical steroid withdrawal syndrome. And I did ask his permission to talk about this, and he did say that he would rather more people know about this condition because it's not a condition that is really widely known. It is starting to kind of become a little bit more widely known due to video bloggers talking about it. There are more people who are making videos about it. So if you just search up topical steroid withdrawal on YouTube, you will actually find quite a few videos about it. There is one particularly long one that I haven't had yet the heart to watch, partially because, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I am fairly traumatized by this experience. So I haven't watched it yet, but if you want to know more about what the condition entails, you can go watch some videos on YouTube. But on our end, what ended up happening was that my husband has had, I guess you could call it bad skin for his whole life. He's had really bad eczema his whole life. And so the doctors would always prescribe him steroids, topical steroids. And they would prescribe it to be stronger and stronger whenever his skin basically stopped reacting favorably to them. Mm-hmm. So he has also tried every diet you could possibly think of under the sun. He's tried some very interesting, almost, I guess you could call them homeopathic what's the word for it? Like kind of
Remedies?
remedy, I guess you could say. It's not really a remedy, but it's more like experimental remedies, I guess, is it.
Experimental treatment?
I guess so. Maybe treatment is a better word for it. Because what they would do is, I think he had one where they like injected something into his skin.
Wow.
Yeah. This was when he was younger. And so anyway, his skin has been really, really bad a few times in his life, like unimaginably bad. One was at the end of high school. Another was when I first met him. And then the third time was this time. So especially because one of the times that his skin was so bad was literally right when I met him, there was always this kind of fear in my mind that it would come back. And basically this past summer, we lived that fear. That nightmare really did come true. Mm-hmm. It came back. And so his skin, the symptoms that really made us go pretty insane was, one, it was itching everywhere. At first, it was just localized to behind his thighs, but then it's like suddenly it's like he exploded. Like his skin was cracking and weeping and oozing, and it was itchy. Like it looked like he had touched poison ivy everywhere. Like that's what it looked like. And so, especially because it was oozing, because we had never seen it ooze before, we thought he was infected. So we brought him to urgent care, which, for those of you who are listening from outside of the US, including Carrie,
Me?
urgent care is kind of between your primary care, so your regular doctor, and emergency. So we didn't take him to the emergency room. We took him to the in-between, which is kind of like an on-call primary doctor. Like that's the...
Oh, interesting.
Exactly, right? So like you could go basically during non-working hours and they would be open. Yeah.
Well,
like they had...
That's really good.
Exactly. It's that in between. So it's more expensive than going to see a primary care doctor, but it's less expensive than going to the emergency room.
Okay.
So we went to see them. They gave him a shot of steroids, like so that it would act immediately, because they saw the inflammation and they were like, we need to get this inflammation down now. So they actually shot him with a steroid shot. They prescribed him prednisone on top of that, and they prescribed antibiotics. And yeah, I believe that was it for the first bit. Then after he stopped the antibiotics, the oozing came back, and his itch was just as bad. So we went back to the urgent care I think maybe 2 weeks after that. And they prescribed more antibiotics. They prescribed more steroids. We did not want to put him back on steroids, so we did not do the steroids, which is prednisone. That's an oral steroid. We only did the antibiotic ointment. The ointment did not really work. If anything, it made him ooze even more.
Gosh.
And then the evening that we were recording for the first episode of Opus 2, what was supposed to be the first episode of Opus 2, we had to stop because the itch was so bad. We had to go to the drugstore and get that prescription for prednisone because we had to give him something to calm his skin down. At that point, we didn't know about topical steroid withdrawal yet.
Yeah.
So we thought that we had to do this. A week into him taking that course of prednisone, because that is... I think that was a 2-week course. And somewhere in between, I had to take him into urgent care a third time. It's all blended in together now. I know for a fact I took him in 3 times because we have documentation for the 3 times that we took him in.
Right.
But I believe it was about a week into his basically second round of steroids. He was looking online to look up uses of tea tree oil, because tea tree oil is known to help with skin things. Right. And so he literally Googled tea tree oil, and Google auto-completed it with an auto suggestion of "and topical steroid withdrawal." And he was like, what is that? Yeah. So he let Google auto-complete it, looked it up, and he found some anecdotal blogs about this syndrome called topical steroid withdrawal. And this was the first time we found anything, like any medical diagnosis that matched his symptoms completely. Now, just to give you guys an idea of just how wacky these symptoms are, they're everything from red skin syndrome, which is basically that your skin is just such an inflamed red. It's like lobster red, but for some reason it spares your nose and it spares the palms of your hands. So you can get something of what's called a red sleeve, which essentially your skin on your arm is just all red except for your palms. And your face is all red except for your nose. That's actually, it's, if you think about it, it's actually a hallmark symptom of topical steroid withdrawal.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look up red skin syndrome, RSS, you'll read about this actually on Wikipedia. And he had those, especially this time around was his face. The last time he had skin this bad, he definitely had the red sleeve. We remember that from before. So there's that, but there's also wacky things like the skin cracking and oozing. And when it's oozing, it's not really oozing infected like plasma or stuff like that. It's actually more that the blood vessels don't know how to control themselves because they're so used to being suppressed by steroids, that they basically overflow. They get too big and they break through the skin. So they literally crack through the skin like that. So when you're oozing literal like proteins out. Like, so he had to eat so much and he still lost weight, even though he's eating like a maniac, because he's literally like leaking proteins out of his skin. So there's that. The other is body temperature control issues. He literally could not control his own body temperature. He would go from freezing cold to overheating in seconds, you know? And body spasms, full body spasms, is actually one of the symptoms of topical steroid withdrawal. It's basically a withdrawal syndrome. A withdrawal symptom. I read recently that alcohol withdrawal symptoms also include things like body spasms. It's straight up withdrawal symptoms, you know?
Yeah.
So like, but no one would, at least I never thought that all of these wacky symptoms were linked into one diagnosis. When I first met him, like we'd be cuddling and he'd have a full body spasm. And I was just like, oh man, this is such an interesting quirk of my new boyfriend. You know, like I didn't think that there was actually something wrong with him, you know? And he would often complain about like getting really cold suddenly and then overheating immediately. And I was just like, oh man, my new boyfriend is like so sensitive, you know? Like now that I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, he like 100% that was topical steroid withdrawal back then too. So anyway, he found this blog, he sent it to me. We both basically started almost crying because this is finally the first time that we have finally found a most likely diagnosis of what he has. And, you know, we took it to our naturopathic doctor who had guided us through the last time he was going through something as serious as this. And she confirmed that it was topical steroid withdrawal because since she had him as a patient, she has since had other patients that exhibited the same symptoms, and she has since learned about topical steroid withdrawal. This syndrome is actually so new to, I guess, public awareness that even the National Eczema Association did not have an article up about it until March of 2021. And his skin exploded in July. So I don't.
Very, very recent.
It's very recent that people know about it. I'm sure it's been around for basically as long as steroids have been around, but no one's really done much. I guess like no one's really brought a lot of public awareness to it. From what I've read, there seems to be some papers and research documenting the possibility of this syndrome since the 60s.
Oh.
So it's not like no one's known about it, but it's more that there's not a lot of public awareness of it. Like the wider public doesn't really know. And actually a lot of doctors don't know about it yet either. One of the things that the articles that we read about from the National Eczema Association and also from ITSAN, which I believe is the International Topical Steroid Awareness Network, I believe that's what it's called. They have a whole website about what it is, how to deal with it, how to find a doctor who knows about it. They did mention that not a lot of doctors know about it. So it's one of those things that you have to be very persistent as the patient, and you really have to advocate for yourself and be like, this is what's happening to me. Stop giving me more steroids.
Right.
So really the only cure is time and no steroids. So we've been waiting it out. The symptoms come in waves. And so far we have seen 2 big waves. So one was in July. And then the second one came in mid-October. Mid to late October was when the second one hit. And it's a lot of sleepless nights. There are so many tears. We had a lot of talks about what is it that we really value in life. It really made us reassess our priorities and our values. And yeah, there was a lot of tears, a lot of sleepless nights. The amount of sleeplessness I would compare to that of having a newborn, except we did not have the reward of having a newborn. Yeah. So that is why we stopped making these episodes for so long, was because,
in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's more to it, but this is just to give you guys a bit of an insider's look as to basically why Joanna disappeared for the last half a year. It's been rough is what I'll say.
It most certainly has. I mean, as someone who is more or less observing from the outside, it's a pain in a way that there's nothing, as your friend, there's nothing that I could have done.
No. And what you did was exactly what I needed, though. You would send me random texts asking me how I'm doing, but you would also leave me alone too, which is also what I needed. You know,
we struck a balance.
Yeah, we did strike a balance. Yeah, like you definitely poked me when I needed it. You know, and but it's tough because when you're in the thick of it, the worst part is not knowing what the end of the story is.
Yeah.
Right. And things are always changing. There's always developments in a situation like this. You don't really know that it's ended until like a long time after it's ended.
Yeah. A lot of it is just in hindsight in a way, I think.
Yeah, like by the time that we're recording this right now, John and I have had at least, I would say, about 3 to 4 weeks of decent sleep. I just got my COVID booster shot 2 days ago, and yesterday was an absolute gong show in terms of my well-being. It was terrible. But the night before that, I can actually tell you, even though I was going through these COVID booster symptoms, I got more sleep that night than I did on an average night dealing with taking care of John while he's going through TSW, topical steroid withdrawal. I got more sleep with COVID symptoms, waking up all the time. I actually felt more well rested from that than I did from an average night with my husband having TSW. Like, that can show you how bad it was.
Yeah. It's not hard to imagine. I mean, you compared it to almost like having a newborn, because you're in a way you're almost always on edge. You don't know what's going to happen next, or when the next itch attack is going to happen. So you're just constantly on the go mode.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was one of the hardest parts, was you can never let your guard down.
Yeah.
Even going to sleep, like even now, I think I have a leftover traumatic response where I cannot fall asleep unless I hear John snoring. John is my husband, if you guys haven't heard his name yet. But like I can't fall asleep unless I've been listening to him snore for at least like 5 to 10 minutes. Because just because he starts snoring, it doesn't mean that he stays asleep. At least when he was going through the thick of it, I had to like listen and know that he was asleep for like, there were nights that I would just listen to him snore for half an hour before I even let myself relax.
You calm down a bit. And
Yeah. And I can feel that I'm definitely needing to retrain myself to not do that. Because it will mean that I always sleep half an hour after him. Right?
That's my situation. That's a different story, though.
Yeah.
But yeah. Your body's just wound, and your mind especially, I think, is just wound so tight.
Oh, yeah.
And you're so used to that. It's
about
a half a year.
It was a half a year of that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a while.
It was... I don't recommend this experience. Not that any of us can choose whether or not you have this experience, but I don't recommend it. It was horrible, because it was like, I think to me, the most horrible thing is that like I love this person. I'm in love with him. He's everything and more than I ever wanted in a partner. And it's like watching the person you love the most in the world die in front of your eyes. Like, their personality just completely fades. It's a shell of themselves that you see.
It's hard.
Right? Like, all of the responsibility falls on you of taking care of your home together and caring for him. Basically all of the work goes on you, but then he also felt so guilty for me having to pick up. There were a lot of tears shed on both of our parts, because he felt so guilty. He felt so bad, because he really is a team member, He's a true partner. And so for him to see me picking up so much of the work, it broke his heart. It's hard, because I had to convince him to let me take up more responsibility. We had talks where I had to convince him to stop trying so hard, just rest,
Yeah.
All right, that was the other thing. The other interesting symptom is that it completely messes up your circadian rhythm. I basically ended up caring for a vampire for half a year. No biggie.
Night is day, day is night.
Exactly.
Who cares about the sun
his
and moon?
circadian rhythm? I know. His circadian rhythm basically thought that every day was 2 days. So his circadian rhythm thought that 7 a.m. was nighttime, but then he would wake up at like 10 or 11, something like that. So it's like 3 or 4 hours. And then it would think it's night again at like 2. And then sleep for another like 3 hours.
Short bursts.
Yeah. So like in total, he would get about 5 to 6 hours of sleep a day. A day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was caring for a vampire. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we were trying to train his body to go back to sleep at a more normal time, when we could feel that his circadian rhythm could be trained back again, the only way to make him go to sleep and stay asleep is if I gave him a head rub. And sometimes these head rubs would last like an hour. And for me, it was the difference between getting him to fall asleep and stay asleep at 3 versus 7.
Yeah.
Like it's a big enough difference that I'm like, I would rather sacrifice my forearm
And your fingers.
to give him this head rub. But yeah, it was tough, you know. But yeah, like we've been so wound up for so many months. He's been beaten half to death, basically. But you know, I can say that for the last month, about 1 month now, we've been able to have more or less a pretty normal life again. His symptoms are now all localized to behind the thighs again, basically back where we started.
Right.
We're just hoping there's not a huge third wave again, but we don't know.
Because the body just has to slowly, bit by bit, work out all of the, or flush out all of the steroids that's been in there over all these years.
Yeah, so I learned something interesting from, I forget who it was that I was talking to. Right, it was one of my students who's a pharmacist. And I was talking to her about the situation, and she's like, yeah, steroids are fat soluble, meaning that steroids get stored in your fat. And when you burn the fat, you're re-releasing steroids into your system.
Oh.
So that would explain why it kind of comes in waves.
Yeah.
You know? We, like in July, it was very, very warm. So we all sweat a lot, burn a little bit more. The second wave happened after we had been out of the country for a while. And we were walking around a lot and burning a lot. And then he had his second wave. So it makes a ton of sense. Yeah. But essentially, flushing steroids out of your system takes a really long time. I've heard some absolute nightmare stories of people who took years and years to battle through TSW. It sucks.
Yeah. Well, you've started now, so it can only
get better.
You can only flush out more from here. I know that's not saying much, but
every time that he has healed from TSW, because we believe this is his third time actually. So we believe the first time happened at the end of high school, and that the second time happened when we first met. Each time he healed, we now realize it was actually because he rage quit steroids. He just rage quit it. You know, because like he's not doing well anyway. Why bother putting this stuff on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Bye.
Whatever. Yeah. We realized that was actually why he healed. And he healed very slowly every time. I think the last time that he went through this, the whole healing process was about a year and a half. Because he exploded pretty much when we met. When we started dating, he was already pretty much exploding. And then that was in April of 2014. and he was not really fully healed until almost 2016, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like that. It took a really long time. So we were guessing that this healing process is going to take a really long time too.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually surprised that we've gotten this far so fast. So we don't know if that means that we're going to have a third wave coming, or if just this last little bit is just the most stubborn to go away.
Yeah.
But we just know that with time and patience and no steroids, we'll eventually get there. It's just that he was put back on steroids because he had a flare-up.
Okay.
So he had
How long?
Probably like a year or two before the explosion.
Okay.
Don't use steroids for more than 2 weeks, guys. Don't.
I second that. A little side story from my own experience. I mean, nothing at all compared to what John had to go through. But ever since I turned 10 and my family moved to a home with carpet, that was the very first time we had carpet in our home. Something happened to my, I think, left hand index finger.
Right. Yeah, you told me about this.
It exploded into teeny tiny little like tapioca like dots. Extremely itchy, and it also spread a little bit to the hand here. Actually, what is this part of the hand called?
Yeah, what is that part? Like under on the back of the hand,
top
under
of your hand,
the
front,
knuckle?
under something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just here. Sorry, for those of you just listening, I'm pointing to the top of my hand, not the palm, but the other side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just where your veins and your tendons are, I guess. It was itchy there as well too. So no one knew what was happening. My parents brought me to a dermatologist. They had no idea as well too. So the thing that they gave me was steroids. It's a very low dose, but I applied it anyway. And that continued for like 3-4 years. But what I noticed,
gosh.
yeah, but what I didn't apply a lot though.
Okay.
To be fair, it's just like a dab, less than a pea size, I think.
Yeah.
But what I noticed over time was that my skin got thinner and thinner.
Yep.
And every time I scratched, it would bleed.
Yep.
Like little fissures would appear and it would bleed. So I don't remember if it was my mom or myself. We just decided to stop.
Yeah.
And it comes back every year, those little tapioca like dots. I've also had to do research, and I've self-diagnosed it as dishydrosis. If anyone who's listening or watching has experience with that, please do share with us as well too.
Yes, please.
I don't know how well known it is. Again, it's for my case, it's nothing as severe as John, but I do know there are people with cases who are with extremely severe dishydrosis as well. Their hands or feet are all swollen.
Oh my gosh.
Like I think it's hard for them to pick up things or even walk or function in daily life. So it can go to the extreme as well too.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm lucky that it's only very, very minor. It's contained to just my hands.
Yeah. Has your skin gotten thicker now?
I think so. Because when I scratch, it doesn't bleed as easily.
Oh, that's
but I can still tell it during winter time, this is the area that cracks the most.
Oh,
and it hurts.
Yeah. John keeps telling me that too, because back when I was helping him apply topical steroids, he would make me religiously wash my hands thoroughly.
Yeah.
To get it off of me. There have been cases of people, the caretakers, who applied topical steroid on the patient, that the caretakers got TSW.
Yeah.
And I think the worst thing about TSW is that you can be applying it only in a very little spot, but your inflammation is on another part of the body. That's how TSW shows itself, is that it's an inflammation that is uncontrollable and spreads like wildfire. And it's totally not even in a spot that you were treating. It's in a completely other spot. So you end up feeling like you're kind of like trying to catch a fire. That's what you feel like you're doing, because you treat one part, it pops up in another. You treat that part, then it pops up, it spreads, and then it pops up somewhere else, right? So you keep chasing this thing that you can never catch, and before long it takes over your entire body.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Oh, the flaking too, because the oozing then crusts, and then that layer of skin basically flakes off, and it's like snow coming off. Like it's insane. The amount of cleaning that we did was insane. Yeah. I don't recommend. Not that you can choose. No. I don't recommend. But it's the use of steroids really should, like topical steroids, really should not be more than 2 weeks. And yet for some reason John was not told that until he was older. So either the research finally caught up and people were like, yo, no, you need to tell your patients that you can only use this for a short period of time. Or doctors just didn't tell him because they didn't know how else to fix them. Don't know.
Either way, now we know.
Yeah. Exactly. So there you go, guys. That's why I've been away for half a year. And we didn't want to come back to this episode without explaining, because we know a lot of you have been waiting, and for us to be silent for so long is very odd, and we didn't want you guys to be worried that something even more dramatic happened, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, it was very dramatic, everything that happened, but we want you to know what it is and not have to guess.
And you are both more or less on the mend now.
We're on the mend now. Yeah,
thank
definitely.
Goodness.
Yeah, I've been sort of transitioning back to normal life. I'm transitioning back to practicing again. The last half year was just a lot of just playing music for fun, because, you know, I didn't want to throw away my passion for music making. So instead of practicing, all of my practice streams became sight reading streams, or oohing and awing at like random fun music gadgets and the latest music technology or flute technology or blah blah blah. So I just kind of kept up the nerding, which was surprisingly very healing. I think I hadn't experienced the healing properties of being a nerd, a flute nerd, for a really long time, and it was very wholesome and very it was just exactly what I needed. I needed to be in a space where I could escape and just be a nerd, and I needed that hour to just not care. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you're only human, and you do need that break once in a while.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what good would it do if you crashed and burned as well too? Right.
And I think what I realized was these are the moments that I've been practicing for, right?
Yep.
My whole life, like I realized that this is why I've been practicing so hard, is because now I can pretty much play anything I want.
Yeah.
With ease, you know? And like I can feel like I can fully express myself. I have the techniques down, you know? So it would actually be such a waste if I didn't just spend these last 6 months being a nerd, you know?
Yep.
Because this is the whole point of practicing so hard. So, but yeah, like I realized that I was finally living the fruits of my labor, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something that felt really good about that, really fulfilling, and brought peace and joy, and, you know, in the midst of a storm, you know. Yeah.
Much needed.
It is. It really is.
So I think that about sums up what was happening the past half a year or so. And thank you all who have stayed with us, and thank you for being so patient and rejoining us now.
Exactly. So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up for today.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to see if I remember how to do this outro, because it has been like half a year since I've done it. So let's try this. So
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you all for listening to all the drama that has happened in the time that we've been silent. We hope that you will keep joining us for the rest of this season. You can find us on our website, letsplayitbyear.com. There it is on the screen. I love it, with our beautiful logo designed by hers truly, Carrie. You can also find us on our social media, which is
we have Facebook,
Let's Play It by Ear Podcast. We've got
Twitter.
Let's Play It by Ear Podcast, which I believe is let_ear on Twitter.
Yes.
And we have Instagram, Let's Play It by Ear Podcast. So please follow us, like us on all those things. There's also, of course, YouTube, Let's Play It by Ear Podcast, is it? Something like that.
Let's Play It by Ear Podcast, yes.
Honestly, guys, if you just go on YouTube and you search up Let's Play It by Ear Podcast, y'all are going to find us, okay? This episode will be uploaded there, as well as on Anchor.fm. Again, Anchor.fm, just search up Let's Play It by Ear Podcast and you'll find us. And it'll also be like, you're probably finding this through a link or something, right? There'll be more links in the description of wherever it is that you are watching or listening to this.
Yes.
So please follow us everywhere. Carrie in particular is much better at the social media than I am. So please engage with us on the social media, because it won't be like on my private stuff for Just Another Flutist, where I don't. No, indeed. Carrie is very good at the social media engagement, so please join us there. All right, guys, we thank you all so very much for joining us today, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Goodbye.
See you.